Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Teaching Maths in the senior phase. I am Nalini Maharaj. I will be a lecturer in this module. My email details, should you need to communicate with me, is on the screen right now. As part of the assessment for this module, you will complete 2 lesson plans. Your first lesson plan is at the beginning of the module, and the other lesson plan is at the end of the module, with different expectation levels. The first lesson plan can be viewed as a training, and the second lesson plan will be scored as if you are experienced at writing lesson plans. All lesson plans can either be typed or handwritten. The submission portal for lesson plans is on the ECI module page. Note, there will be no extension for those who missed the due date. The mark allocation for the lesson plans are as follows. The first lesson plan has 5%, and the second lesson plan will be 5%, giving you a total of 10%. This lecture will be based on how you will go about planning your lesson. So let us begin with what is a lesson plan. In your textbook by Brahia, it says that the document that details our objectives and the day's activities is referred to as the lesson plan. From this, we gather that a lesson plan includes objectives. We in South Africa, however, generally refer to objectives as outcomes. The learning outcomes, which are integral to any lesson plan, consists of observable and mostly measurable outcomes for all learners. In our lesson plans, we write, at the end of the lesson, the learners will be able to, and we list what we expect learners to be able to perform. Brahia's definition also refers to the day's activities. In terms of the lesson plan template that we have provided you, the day's activities refers to teachers' intentions, learning outcomes, expected learners' prior knowledge, assessment strategy, teaching strategy, introduction of the lesson, the 4 stages of development, integration, consolidation, extension activity, learners needing special attention, resources, reflection, homework, and references. You will notice then that lesson plans need not be quite, that lesson plans need to be quite detailed. Again, Brahia reminds us that although an excellent plan does not ensure a powerful lesson, you can be almost certain that the lack of a focused, detailed lesson plan generally spells disaster for the classroom teacher. The success of a lesson depends on a good lesson plan that details the beginning point of the lesson, lists the objectives or the outcomes, lists a set of instructions for how to get a class to where the teacher wants it to go. So this is the first part of the template and of your lesson plan, which begins with some general information that you need to provide with each lesson plan that you do. You will have your name, your student number, your school or institution, your mentor teacher's name, the date, grade, term, the number of learners, time of your lesson, the subject you will be teaching, CAPS page number, your content area, your lesson plan topic, and the language that you will be teaching in. While the primary purpose of the lesson plan is to guide your lesson, it is important to understand that your lesson plan is often read by administrators, supervisors, evaluators, and sometimes even a substitute teacher. The general information helps to frame the lesson and serves as a starting point for the writing of the lesson plan. Teacher's intention. The section on teacher's intention includes information on what it is that you, as the teacher, are hoping to achieve in the lesson. So, the intention could be to introduce learners to factorization of the difference of two squares. Or the teacher's intention could be to revise grouping of like terms, which would also lead to factorization. The learning objectives or the outcomes. As I have already mentioned, the learning objectives or outcomes are statements that indicate what is it that we want learners to be able to do at the end of the lesson. The learning outcomes need to be clear and unambiguous. In a sample lesson in your textbook by Brahia, the following objective is given. The student will learn about pi. This is a vague statement. How do we know when someone has learnt? What does it mean to learn about something? Brahia suggests that a clearer learning outcome would be the student will define pi as the ratio of circumference to diameter in a circle. The learning outcome must be written in a way that it can be assessed. Expected learners' prior knowledge. After you have stated the learning outcomes and are clear as to what learners should know by the end of the lesson, you, as the teacher, need to think about what the learners should already know. It is important to decide what expected learners' prior knowledge is required before the new lesson is taught. As lessons in maths generally build on the old. Assessment strategy is an essential part of your lesson plan. Indeed, it is essential to the learning process. Therefore, careful thought needs to be given to the assessment strategies to be included in the lesson plan. Recall that our lesson plan began with learning outcomes. It is therefore important to identify in advance how we will know if the learners have met these outcomes. Assessment strategies need to be linked to the learning outcomes. The assessment strategies could be observations, where we are informally assessing the learner. These informal, formative assessments may help to decide on how much time to spend on an idea. Lesson plans, however, also require formal assessments, such as the use of a checklist or peer assessment or questions. You may refer to the sample lesson 2 in your textbook from pages 151 to 153. The assessment summarizes the 4 strategies that the teacher will use to measure the learner's understanding. These were anecdotal comments, specific questions, journal entries, and a homework assignment. Your teaching strategies on your lesson plan refer to methods used to help learners learn the desired content. Teaching strategies identify the different available learning methods to enable learners to achieve the learning outcomes. For example, you could use visualization, where you bring a dull concept to life. Or you could use cooperative learning, where you group learners together to solve a mathematical puzzle. Mathematics lends itself to inquiry-based teaching strategy, where as a teacher, you could pose thought-provoking questions for learners to think for themselves. Incorporating technology into your teaching is a great way to actively engage your learners, especially as digital media surrounds young people in the 21st century. The introduction to your lesson deals with how you will introduce the lesson and capture the attention of the learner. Brahia refers to this as motivation. For example, good morning, open your books to page 147 and take out your homework. Clearly, there is nothing motivating with the above introduction. The introduction can be brief, but it must be linked to the lesson content, and it must capture the learner's interest. It should give them a reason to want to study what they are about to encounter. You may refer to some motivating introductions provided by Brahia on pages 143 to 144. When you are working on your lesson plans. In the first developmental stage, when you are doing your lesson plan, you will explain how you will teach core content and or skills and values. Included here will be activities that will take place, as well as the resources to be used. In the second developmental stage, the important inclusions of the lesson are: what is the core content of the lesson? What activities take place? Are resources used? Listing of level 1, 2, and 3 questions using Bloom's taxonomy. Ensure that new concepts are taught and explained. How and when you will use your resources. You can refer to resources like worksheets, concepts, etc. as Appendix A or B, but you must ensure that it is attached to your lesson plan. In this third developmental stage, you should refrain from explaining things like how you will greet the learners, how you will call the learners to the front. But you should include how are the learners guided through the lesson? How will you check for and monitor understanding or misunderstanding of the new knowledge? How do the learners attempt to master the knowledge? How are the learners engaged in the lesson? What activities are they required to complete? These should be explained and listed well. In the fourth developmental stage, you will include how and where did you incorporate ICT, information and communication technology, in your lesson? In general, when writing the developmental stages of your lesson plan, heed the following tips provided by Rahia. Indicate clearly what the learner will do and what the teacher will do throughout the lesson. Be careful not to include the anticipated role of the learners in the lesson. Throughout the lesson, you should indicate how learners will be assessed. Your lesson plan should demonstrate some form of flexibility. Remember that a plan is a roadmap, and teachers need to be prepared to take side trips that students may suggest. So be flexible. There are learners of different abilities and cultures in your classes. We should therefore be prepared to include modifications and accommodations that will attempt to address these differences. Make use of transition statements to assist your learners to move from one activity to the next. The integration aspect of your lesson plan expects you to integrate with other subjects or even with work from previous lessons. You must show evidence of this in the presentation of your lessons and not just on your lesson plan. Consolidation refers to the wrapping up of your lesson. You should summarize the main concepts or skills that you taught during the developmental phase. Brahia suggests that the lesson should be carefully planned to conclude with a logical wrap-up activity. This is known as closure. In sample lesson 1 in the textbook, the lesson closes with give the class their homework assignment. This does not give any indication as to whether the learners understood the contents of the lesson. This is not a good example of a closure to a lesson. On the other hand, students could, for example, be invited to comment or reflect on a statement that you, as a teacher, creates in the last 5 minutes of class to raise the tone for the next class period. The aspect on extension activity on your lesson plan you will explain the expanded opportunities for enrichment that you will provide for the gifted learners or for those that finish the task earlier than others. This will require that you think about this way in advance. You will also need to make provision for learners needing special attention. You should explain what accommodations will be made for the learners needing special attention. These may be slower learners or a learner being taught in a language other than their home language. Under resources on your lesson plan, you will list those that you used in your lesson. For example, instructional aids, materials, tools, worksheets, and the rubrics that you may have used. Your reflection is an important aspect. One of the things that good teachers of maths do is reflect on the effectiveness of their lessons. Teachers should reflect on the lesson and student progress. Then identify the next steps in planning lessons and designing future interventions. So you will have to ask yourself, how do you feel about the lesson? In your opinion, what contribution have you made to making that lesson a success? Homework will have to be listed and explained. So you will have to give the actual homework exercise. In the reference part of your plan, you have a checklist with the lesson content and instructional procedures. What are the summaries that you will be putting on the board? Your learner activity sheets, your contingency plans. Should there be a break or should something not be able to go on as planned? What are your contingency plans? And a summary of the use and placement of teaching aids. These need to be part of your lesson plan. The ability to plan an effective lesson is one of the most fundamental of all teaching skills, according to Prahia, page 162. The more experienced teachers are able to write lesson plans as an outline in less detail. The beginning teacher, however, needs to spell out specific examples, questions, and comments to make the lesson flow. Since we will be using the following lesson plan rubric to assess your lesson plans, you should pay particular attention to this. Ensure that the criteria mentioned here are included in your lesson plans. So, on a scale from 0 to 5 marks, you will be assessed on the following 20 points. Whether all of this is in your lesson plan. The introduction and linking to prior knowledge. Whether your lesson objectives and outcomes have been formulated correctly. The selection of teaching strategies. Linking of CAPS and content knowledge. Your selection of resources that should add value to the lesson. Planned method of assessment. Lesson plan should be completed in detail, should have focused and well thought out questions. There should be no grammatical errors. You should have a well-researched lesson plan showing students' general knowledge. Good verbal and non-verbal communication should be evident. Your ability to establish and maintain rapport. The use of learning and teaching resources. Learner participation. Response to learners' questions, answers. Managing learning. Pacing or time management, learning climate or your learning atmosphere, your observed achievement of your objectives, and your overall confidence and enthusiasm. These are all projected in your lesson plan, and you will have to think carefully about each one of this before you write it up as part of your plan. So finally, I thought I would just give you a brief overview of what's happening at present and what is still to come. We're looking at, you've been already to schools and you've done observations. You've had your lesson observation has been completed. You are now in week 5 and you have to start doing your lesson plan 1. You have readings to do based on your textbook and a resource list that will assist you in your lesson plan. Next week, you will be preparing for your micro-teaching lesson, which will be peer critiqued. You will also be writing your test. And the week thereafter, you will have to hand in your micro-teaching video. So that is where we are. That is the reason I decided to prepare you for doing your lesson plans in the best way possible so that it can assist you as well with your micro-teaching lesson, which needs to be videoed and uploaded. Thank you. If there are any questions,
Nalini, thank you so much. There are no questions from our staff or students watching online currently, but let's ask Jacaranda, Rihanna, any questions from students with you? Rihanna?
Hello, Simon, can you hear me?
Yes. Any questions from students on the Montana campus?
No, we don't have any. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you. Pauline and Nare on the Waterfall campus in Midrand. Any questions from your side? We'll take that as a no. Nalini, I see we've got two questions from Onalau, who's watching via Zoom, and they ask, they've already submitted the lesson plan. Are they going to resubmit? And then a second question, how do they go about doing micro lessons? So if I can ask you to just answer those two.
hello. You've submitted your lesson plan and are going to resubmit. Okay. And how do you go about doing the micro lessons? I'm going to be posting on Moodle about your micro lessons. It will be a short 5-minute lesson that you will prepare, you will video, and you will upload onto the Moodle site. So that is basically what the micro lesson is, a very short lesson. However, it requires proper planning and proper everything that has to be thought about regarding the planning stages. Thanks. Yes, this is Nalini Maharaj signing. Oh, sorry. Yes.
So regarding the micro lesson that would be uploaded to Moodle, we have to do a lesson plan for that?
Okay, that is why we've asked you to do the lesson plan this week, so that you don't have a duplication of work. So the lesson plan that you are working on for this week can be used to do your micro teaching lesson.
Students with no other questions, we're going to end the session now. Thank you, Nalini, for your first lecture. We look forward to your next lecture in a week or two's time. Thank you.